Spot ETF flows last week saw Bitcoin outflows of a staggering $1.1 billion, and Ethereum also saw an outflow of almost $730 million. Meanwhile, the new kids on the block, XRP and Solana, were actually seeing inflows rather than outflows. Sol saw about 46 million, and XRP saw $243.5 million in inflows. And again, that has gotten a lot of people talking. But welcome back to the Crypto ZX channel, to the XRP family. I'm sure you guys are probably wondering what's going on with the markets at this point. I've given you guys market analysis update. You guys should be well aware as to what's happening. If not, obviously, you guys know I will be bringing you guys these daily updates on XRP. So looking across the board, we're seeing a sea of red, as you can see for yourself. The price of XRP right now, $2.26. We're down about 0.1% on the USD side of things. We're actually up on the Bitcoin side of things, about 0.5%. The valuation, $136 billion, and the 24-hour trading volume at 4.3 billion. As always, just a quick disclaimer, anything on this channel is not financial advice. Always do your own due diligence and research when you are investing in crypto. So we got a big week ahead of us. You can see for yourself, key economic events this week. Main one to be looking forward to, in my opinion, are going to be the one on Wednesday, as well as the one on Thursday and Friday. So Wednesday, Fed meeting minutes are going to be coming out from the last, FOMC meeting. Thursday, September job report, and Friday is going to be the PMI data and MI consumer sentiment, and of course inflation expectations. So I expect some volatility this week, and we're already starting to see that happening even before the new week started. If you saw Bitcoin, Bitcoin saw a new monthly low at $93,000. We're getting closer and closer to the 0.50 key support line. We're seeing a little bit of a bounce, but again, nothing to be getting excited about, in my opinion, just yet. But let's move forward. As far as the FOMC meeting is concerned, there is one coming up on December 10th. You can see for yourself right now, only 46% chance that we do see a rate cut happening. So again, we'll see what happens. Probability is not looking as good as it was that we did see over the last two FOMC meetings, but we'll see what happens as time goes by. And I think this could change quite substantially after this week, after obviously these data information obviously comes out for us. But let's move forward to take a look at what Charles Hoskinson says, because right now there's a lot of fear across the board. In my opinion, I think this is the most fear that we have seen pretty much since the early 2025 retracement that we did see. That obviously was in April. Since then, this is the most fear that we're seeing across the board. But look what Charles Hoskinson says. Stop staring at the 1 hour chart. Look at 2030. Hoskinson basically said, stop looking at the red candles. The long-term direction is locked in. 550 million people in crypto now, a billion by 2030, and trillions of stocks and bonds moving on chain. And we know that's the whole point of tokenization. When you speak about tokenization, remember that one-stop shop XRP Ledger checks all the boxes. In my opinion, I think we saw so much happening for on-chain, and how TradFi and DeFi came together this year. And I think just starting point at this level that we're in. And I think as time goes by, we're going to see more, especially when Clarity Act goes live. I think that is going to be a big one. But I totally agree with Charles Hoskinson. People look at, oh, okay, what's happening tomorrow? What's happening, the day after, or in a week's time? No, that's not it. You got to look at the long-term perspective. People always look at, oh, you bought Bitcoin back in 2016, you bought Bitcoin back in 2017. Oh, that's so cool. But there were people back then as well, that were buying XRP, but they just sold right after, because they did not have the long-term perspective, because they wanted instant gratification, they wanted instant gains. But there were also people that were holding long term, and the ones that did, those are the ones that are successful. And that could be said even for the last cycle that we were in. Bear market came, no one was touching Solana, for example, no one was touching XRP. People that were still accumulating were the ones that obviously believed and that understood the potential. Obviously, that doesn't mean there's no risk associated to it. There's always risk associated in crypto, even in stocks, but that's where your due diligence and research comes into play. But pretty much what I'm trying to say is, people that were accumulating around those times and there was so much fear across the board. And then, these projects, had a massive bull market. Obviously, just to name two of them that I'm just pointing out, obviously, Solana and XRP in this example, because I'm just kind of basing it off of, the ETFs. So that's why I, am just mentioning those two. But again, same type of thing. A lot of people, "Oh, I can't believe you bought Sol at $8. I can't believe you bought XRP at 30 cents." But again, kind of goes unsaid. Patience is your number one key to follow. You need to really understand what is your overall horizon, especially if you're in it for the long haul. Because if you're in it for overnight success, it's not going to happen. We're not in the OG days of crypto where ICOs were popping off. This and that, there were barely any coins in crypto space, and the chances of making it was quite high. Those days are gone. That moment is gone. We're no longer in the wild west, in my opinion, for crypto. Crypto is going mainstream, and this game has begun. Very like from a smaller perspective, valuation was very low back in the day, but now, we're sitting at about $3.3 trillion in the grand scheme of things. Even that, in my opinion, is still quite low compared to, the other markets. But, but on that note, the game has gotten much, much, much more difficult. So that's something I want you guys to keep in mind and not forget that. And I know, the people that truly understand know that already, but again, a continuous reminder, and I totally agree with what Charles Hoskinson has to say. But let's take a closer look at this. This is something very, very interesting. I kind of want to point out this. Shout out to Chad as always. You can see what he says. Available XRP supply on exchanges, 2.8 billion. The OTC desks will be running a cover for all the ETFs to begin with. Inevitably, they will come to public exchanges. So pretty much what he's trying to get at is, when you talk about ETFs, when it comes to inflows, they're going to the OTC desks to purchase XRP. So if there is a massive, massive amount of interest, and right now with these conditions of market that we're in, yet you saw 250 million in 2 days for inflows. Imagine what happens when you do see, the market sentiment changing. What kind of inflows could we get if we're pulling 250 million right now in this time? What could happen when the things really start heating up? So this might not happen overnight that, you're going to see these, reserves running out, exchange reserves on the OTC desks. But if they do, pretty much what Chad is trying to point out is then, you have to go and buy XRP on public exchanges. So, that's Binance, that's Kraken, so on and so forth. And that's where, if demand exceeds the supply, that's where, supply shock does tend to occur. People talk about supply shock, this and that. So this is, perfect example of that here. And I really like how he kind of, bring this up. At the end of the day, people are speculating. It is quite exciting to, talk about these things, but it does make sense. We saw Ethereum pull crazy numbers for its ETF inflows. But at the beginning of Ethereum ETF existence, as you guys know, we saw a very, very slow inflows. But XRP out the gate has performed really, really strong. But I think it was inevitable at this point. But let's continue to take a look at what's going on. Shout out to Vincent. It says people saying XRP tanked after ETF. Can those people, look at the market as Bitcoin is trading near 93? I totally agree. People mostly focus on what the project itself is doing. So in this example, XRP, what is XRP doing, and just completely forgetting that there is other things involved. There's other indicators that you just cannot ignore. And this is why I talk about Bitcoin and the dominance with you guys every single update. No matter if the market is booming, no matter if the market is going down, we talk about Bitcoin every single time because that is, at the end of the day, the leading indicator of the entire market. But take a look at this. We have big dates coming ahead. For ETF potential, decision on Franklin Templeton ETF. That's to be on the 18th on Tuesday. We might see SEC. If SEC says nothing, this could go live, and their ticker is EZRP. Very interesting, and we're talking about one of the biggest asset managers globally when it comes to the financial institutions. But let's take a look at what's happening with the prices. So as far as the dominance is concerned, we are sitting at about 59.39%. So it's pulling down right now, which is a good sign. Of course, if you're looking at Bitcoin, Bitcoin, like I said, did pull down to $93,000. Again, I talked to you guys about how Bitcoin is showing weakness, and I was not surprised at all that the price of Bitcoin came down to $93,000. We did see a little bit of a bounce right now. We could even see Bitcoin maybe breaking out of this key range, but do expect some volatility this week. But still, I'm not buying it until, of course, we get back into 23.6. I still think we're going to retest the point 50, and obviously breaking below here. You guys already know. I personally think we are going down to 86K, and that would be a move of about 7% after breaking below this key range. So we got to keep those things in mind. As far as XRP price is concerned, you can see obviously it's going to have an impact, with what happened with Bitcoin. You can see, we came down to $2.15 for the first time since November 7th. And we saw a little bit of a bounce because, of course, last time we did see this bounce. So are we going to see the price retesting maybe into the 38.2 key resistance? If you want to put that into perspective, that itself is only a move of about 4.79%. We could definitely get above that even if obviously Bitcoin pushes up to some of these key levels. But again, look at Bitcoin closely because we're still not looking good at for Bitcoin at all right now. So let me know in the comments what you guys personally think. Share your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe if you have not done so already. We'll see you later in Crypto ZX and peace.